It's another Human First AI Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague at Avenue 9. You can find us at avenue9.com. I have a very special guest this week, Brett, and I forgot to ask how you say your last name, but I'm going to guess Farmiloe.
Yeah, no, Farmiloe. Close. Thanks for having me.
Farmiloe, and from featured.com and CEO of Help a Reporter Out, a legendary brand there. Two awesome companies in the PR space. So we're going to talk about how to use AI to get featured in PR, press, interviews, and stuff like that. But then also how that helps you get cited back into AI because you're building credibility and sources and credible mentions that get picked up into learning models and stuff like that. I'm excited to jump into it. Brett, anything else you'd add off the top on what you've been up to lately?
Not really. I think for those who aren't familiar, Featured and HARO are two platforms that connect journalists with sources for stories. It's two platforms that allow anyone with knowledge to share that knowledge and get featured in the media.
Yeah, it's fun. I've been on both sides of this. We didn't talk ahead of time, but I was a radio DJ, so I was in media and found out about Help a Reporter Out a long time ago, but also been on the marketing side of things and trying to get mentioned by people and on the news or get press for clients and stuff. And it's an interesting challenge because I think still in most people's minds, they're thinking that press releases are a thing, that you could like write a press release and send it out somehow, like PR Newswire or something, and people will pick that up and get published. And I feel like that's not how it works anymore. And I have no idea how it works kind of post-pandemic and post-AI. Can you talk to us a little bit about the state of reporting in general?
Yeah, I think that journalism's going through a pretty big moment. And the journalists that I speak with typically have 8 sources of income. They're writing for 5 different outlets as a freelancer. They've got a Substack that they're monetizing. They've got hourly consultations, and they're selling a course or a book and things of that nature. So it's pretty hard for a journalist, and they're always looking out for their next opportunity, which also means that you've got to be able to track what journalist is covering which beat and which outlet, and that's consistently moving. So there's 2 different types of PR. There's reactive PR and there's proactive PR. The reactive piece is really where we focus, where a journalist is working on a story, they need a source for that story, and they need to connect with them for an interview or to get some comments so they can include it in their article and put it over the finish line and ultimately get paid. And what Featured does and what HARO does is it summarizes a bunch of journalist requests. It allows you to search through, find the one that's most relevant, and respond directly to the journalist. So reactive PR is probably the most accessible portion of public relations. And then the proactive piece is going in saying, hey, I've got news to share. I want to go find journalists that might be interested in that news. And that's traditionally where you have the spray and pray approach with a press release, but more targeted, I guess, announcements and messages are typically what's working in 2026.
That makes a lot of sense. And I thought you were going to say reactive PR was our CEO just got caught cheating at the Coldplay concert, and now reporters are calling us. So we have to be a little
That's pretty reactive.
But
crisis management.
Yeah, I guess it's a combination of things, but it's easier to find somebody who's already writing a story on something and become their source and have a unique perspective on it, or be a credible expert on something, than it is to say, oh, I did this incredible thing. I just hit a Guinness Book of World Records for the most cartwheels in a row. Let me try to get that story picked up somewhere. Yeah,
totally. And it's, if you look at the average small business owner that knows they need to get in front of their customers, knows that they need to be online and in places that their customers are reading, how does that small business owner ultimately take all I mentioned how a journalist has 8 sources of income. A small business owner has 8 different responsibilities, and PR may or may not be one of them. So how does that person show up and maximize their time? And so I think that what's most interesting in 2026 is the AI components. The AI components of being able to find media opportunities to draft suggested responses as you would, and then ultimately be the human in the loop that puts that over the finish line. And so what we've done at Featured is we've developed AI products that allow you to just sign up for a free account, create a profile, and then based off that profile, we'll find media opportunities that match your relevance and your expertise, and then message you whenever there is an opportunity with an actual suggested response on how to reply. And so we're seeing that by putting people on third base and allowing them to take it across the finish line, that's been a really effective way to maximize their time and then maximize their media mentions.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight that a little bit too, because I think so much of the conversation is around generative AI. And I found in this particular case, it's not that helpful. That actually, the kind of predictive analytics, the machine learning, the big data analysis of all these reporters are posting stories, or there's a million news things happening. You can't know what everybody is writing about in any given moment as a human. So, this is a perfect use case for AI to say, okay, everything about me, match me to the best story possible so that I have the best chance of getting picked up. That seems like a really smart use of AI, right?
Absolutely. And don't bother me if there's something that's not relevant. HARO, on the flip side, HARO's been around since 2008. It's a 3 times a day email newsletter that summarizes these journalist requests and sends it out to the same newsletter list. And so people have, it worked in 2008. There wasn't AI to monitor those HAROs and to ping you when there's actually relevant opportunities. In reviving HARO and bringing it back in its original format, there's definitely value to that. A lot of people enjoy getting those 3 times a day and looking to see what journalists are writing about. But again, for that small business owner that's super busy, you need AI to filter and then ultimately identify the one that's going to be most relevant to you.
Yeah. Now, I do want to talk about a little bit about generative AI, because my mission on this show is the human first part, or getting your story right first as a human before you go to generative AI. I'm guessing what reporters don't need is for you to ask an LLM, what should I say about this topic? And then just be the person to say it, because they could ask AI that directly. They don't need a generic AI generated opinion. They need an expert original thought. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. AI has raised the baseline on what's good. And as a platform, we actually do AI detection on every single response that is going through, and then make that transparent to the journalist on whether or not this is 100% AI generated or not, as well as if this is 70% AI generated. And that helps the journalists filter through, find responses that are going to be relevant, authentic, human, and ultimately, be valuable for their story.
So what tips do you have to use AI there? Because you mentioned you do craft some suggested responses or ways to help people pitch. And I think frameworks, or even knowing how to pitch, is different than knowing what you're going to say. Can you help us
Absolutely.
with that a little bit?
Yeah, I think some of the best practices, and just to be on brand here, it's HARO as an acronym. So be helpful, be authentic, be relevant, and be on time. And so being helpful is essentially putting yourself in the journalist's shoes and reading through what you're about to send them and ask yourself, is this helpful for the journalist in writing their story? Authentic is essentially, is this 100% AI generated or is it not? So adding your own authentic take, your own authentic expertise, knowledge to that pitch. Being relevant is, you'd be surprised at how specific these journalists are when they make the request of, here's exactly what I need, follow these exact instructions. So it's amazing how many irrelevant pitches go through to journalists and how much they have to actually filter through to get to the source that they want to use. So making sure that your pitch follows instructions is relevant, and then on time is essentially, like, these journalists are working on deadline. Oftentimes they've got maybe like a 2-hour window to get connected with the source. So making sure that you're on top of it is a pretty big one too.
Yeah, those are tough challenges. Anything else before we wrap this up? Because I do want to talk about the benefits of why would you even want to get listed. And some people are probably thinking like, well, is press dead? Does anybody watch the news anymore? Nobody reads the newspaper. Why would I even want to get listed, would be my next question.
Yeah, I think that where and how people are wanting to get featured in 2026 has changed. It's not just ink and fast company, it's podcasts, it's emails, it's popular Substacks and more. I think that it's, again, a matter of identifying which outlets are going to be valuable for you and which ones allow you to reach your customers and your audience. So I think that there's an evolving landscape of PR and how that is shifting and changing. Reactive PR, as we defined, is still a pretty critical component of that. And there's still a lot of value to getting featured in some of those traditional media outlets, because if you look at LLMs and you look at how those citations are generated, it's from trusted, authoritative, relevant sources. And so getting featured in LLMs starts with getting featured in traditional media.
Yeah, that's really where I was going to go next, is just the power of that for SEO and AEO. But also, I think just in general, when we think about all the AI generated slop that's out there, an actual curated original piece by a reporter or original thought of yours that gets featured somewhere, becomes valuable because everything else becomes like a photocopy of a photocopy. And eventually there's going to be an insane demand for original content. What's your take on that? Do you see it becoming more or less of a factor as we go forward in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, look, you see it with a lot of the companies now today that are generating human data from true domain experts and are using those to fill in knowledge gaps with these models. And so you're seeing company like model builders have to go to specialized doctors, lawyers, accountants, finance professionals, and ask them very specific questions to get their answers so they can improve those model outputs. Same thing is going to be true, and that's really around post-training LLMs. The pre-training is you have to get stuff that is going to fill these niche gaps that you've got. It's got to be timely, it's got to be relevant, it's got to be towards 2026. Where does that information come from? And ultimately, you've got to continue to feed these LLMs so that it has positive outputs, and they're going to be on a hunt to find that information so that they could satisfy customer demand. So I would agree. I think that the pre-training side of things just gets increasingly harder, and the more niche that you are, probably the more valuable the content that you're creating.
Now, there's also an interesting subdivision of being cited by LLMs, which is there are actually AI reporters and things out there now. I think it's easy we saw it first with sports scores, where it's like, okay, an AI could read a box score and give a nice summary of what happened in a game because we know so-and-so got a triple. We know this was the winning run, whatever. It's pretty easy to write there. But I don't see that stopping at that. I think some of these bigger places are going to have a lot of AI generated stories in the future. How about you?
Yeah, totally. I think that like I've got a 12, soon to be 13-year-old son who plays baseball, and there's the Game Changer app that literally produces stories about my son's 12-year-old game. And like now the coverage is expanded in that. I think a more practical example that's a little more meaningful is the rise of news deserts and how many local publications have had to shut down. And AI has stepped up essentially to do this big data analysis of all these municipality reports, police reports, things of that nature that's happening in these different towns. AI is able to monitor all of that different stuff, generate stories, have a human in the loop to essentially determine if this is a story that's worth publishing. And now these news deserts are starting to revive themselves with the help of AI. I think that's really an important trend to monitor.
Yeah, me too. My first guest on this podcast, actually, people can go back to episode 1, was the founder of Ancestry.com has a new AI startup that's doing that, of recording and taking the transcripts from local municipalities who are like, no reporter is going to the whatever Poughkeepsie City Hall, like town meeting or planning board meeting and summarizing that anymore. So how do you use AI to do that? Have you thought about how Featured plays into that, or how you could take advantage of these things by getting into those loops with data?
Yeah, I think Featured is a place where on the publisher side, you could get free, high quality content that's written by real humans. So I think that we're seeing more and more websites be created as news destinations. And ultimately, it can't be all AI generated to be valuable. And I think that there's a lot more opportunities that are going to be opening up for true experts who are interested in submitting a byline article, who are interested in submitting commentary for content refreshes or new article creation. And so I think that it's a pretty exciting time where media is being redefined and humans are the value add to making that content interesting.
Do you have a favorite use case for Featured.com for like small businesses or somebody like, if we're thinking about, okay, this all sounds great, I would love to do that, but either they don't have the ideas or they don't know the use case or how that works for their business, or they get a return. Like, what is kind of like your hero story of, if I could tell everybody to do this is how it works?
Yeah. Featured is your personal PR agent. So that's accessible to anyone, where if you sign up, you get a personal PR agent that will find you media opportunities, draft you suggested responses, and then email you that response to approve or make edits. And so the hero story in this is like, everyone has knowledge to share, especially small business owners. They have 17 plus years of accumulated knowledge about equipment financing or credit repair or whatever it is. And you've probably have documents, you probably have blog posts, you have podcasts, you have different stuff that you've already created. If you're able to ingest that to essentially formulate your knowledge base within Featured, Now we could use that knowledge base to identify stuff that you actually want to talk about. We could draft a response that actually sounds like you, but it doesn't replace you, because you are needed to actually say, yes, this is good, please submit. So I think the call to action here is, if you want to get featured in the media, go to featured.com, you get a personal PR agent, and see what kind of stuff comes through.
Awesome. And then I want to switch to the fun futuristic part, because I have a couple of takes here that I think are interesting. One, we've already mentioned, I think human writers and reporters will become more valuable as we can't trust AI generated stuff, or it becomes more slop or overwhelming. The other one is that I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we may have our own AI generated news, and CNN is going to look different if you watch it than if I watch it. It's going to generate different stories for us. And then there's no kind of centralized news source anymore. Could be one of the options. But what do you think of the options? How do you see it playing out over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think there's a lot of options. I think that the personalized media is one. I think that there's the extremist view that websites won't really exist and we'll just have chat interfaces that will ingest different nodes and personalize those outputs for folks. I think that it's probably somewhere in the middle. I do think that personalized media has a lot of attention to it. And I do think that from a contributor perspective, it's going to be opened up to more sources of folks with knowledge. So in terms of the 3-year prediction, I think that you're going to see a lot more agents in play. Those agents are essentially going to talk with other agents, and it's going to do the jobs that traditionally people don't want to do today. Like, journalists don't necessarily want to put out a HARO, sift through 100 different email messages from folks who are pitching them, and then schedule an interview and go back and forth, do all that stuff. An agent should do all of that, and a journalist should be able to show up to an interview that the agent's already pre-qualified the source, scheduled it for them. The journalist can now get in and do the value-added things that make great stories. Agents will handle a lot of the mundane, boring stuff today, and the connections will be better for it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great take. I think it's fascinating that AM radio still exists and is a viable form. So to think that all of traditional media is going to collapse and not exist seems like a far fetch to me. I also find it fascinating that Mr. Beast has 10 times the amount of viewers than any network television show now. It just happens to be somewhere else. So there still are pop culture moments, even if the channels are distributed. Becomes interesting to me. But if I pushed you further out, what would you say? If within our lifetimes, we seem to be of similar age, if it was 30 years out, what sci-fi movie do you think we end up in? Is it like Minority Report? Is it some sort of world where nobody's working anymore and we're all on a basic income? Yeah.
I think that, I told my son this the other day, that whatever year like Terminator was made and the future was like 30, 40 years and you saw Los Angeles in Terminator, like, I think that we get a little too caught up in the hype cycle. And I think that's actually going to be true in 2026. We're recording this in January. I think that 2026 is the year that AI comes down from the hype cycle, and it's the year of disillusionment, where the model gains won't be as great, as just shocking as they were in 2022, 23, 24, 25. So I think that 30 years from now, it's not going to be Terminator. We're not going to have some crazy stuff. We're probably still going to be talking about the pursuit of AGI. And I think that we're going to be a little more grounded in what is possible. But at the same time, I think that robotics is going to be a space that really rises in importance. I was talking to my son last night about the worst job I ever worked and how robotics is going to replace that and should replace that job. So I think that there's going to be probably an adoption of robots more than anything in 30 years.
Yeah, I talk about that too, even with AI, but with robotics, there's clearly some jobs we don't want humans doing, like bomb diffusing or hazardous mining and stuff that's just not good for humans to do. And then there's also jobs where we don't want robots doing. If you're taking your spouse out for their anniversary dinner, you probably don't want to send your AI avatar robot on that. That won't work out well for you. So there are things that we want to do and that we enjoy. And then there's a wider spectrum than people think. And I think especially what you're saying there about AI agents and stuff can be cool to take some of those tasks we don't do, but also there's just some things that don't lend to that. There's some things that we just need to do, or it's more complicated to figure out than people think. And those hype cycles tend to say, oh, we're going to do it all. We're going to get AGI and they'll be able to handle everything. And it'll just, you click a button and it does the work for you. And I found that at least in 2026, not to be true, that it's a very rudimentary, probably an intern you wouldn't hire level of agent right now.
Yeah. And I think it's a generational thing too. Like if we really zoom out from 30 years from now, if it's proven that a robot can operate on you in a ER emergency room better than a human can, would you do it? Would you have a robot be like, like, for you and I, we'd be like, dude, I'll probably take my chances with the doctor, the robot, whatever the research says. But then for the people who are just being born now, and 30 years, they're going to be like, dude, you're crazy. I'll totally go with the robot. So I think that it's going to take some time to have societal norms catch up. And I think a lot of the current generation has to exit or get older before these robots really are comfortable operating on folks and stuff like that.
Yeah, we grew up in an interesting time where I think all the time that it's crazy. I was born in 79, like before internet or computers or anything. And to get to see what 2050 will be like or something, where you're probably right that, yeah, robot surgeons don't get tired. They don't have bad days. They don't fall asleep. They don't, show up drunk or other things that you wouldn't want your surgeon to do. And so you're like, yeah, you're crazy for letting a human operate it. People used to do that. Like totally. We think about the 1900s or World War, like they used to just chop off your leg if you broke an ankle. Like, are you nuts? Like, I think it will kind of be those types of reactions for how we live now.
Yeah, it's just, I think that the bottleneck is us. It's a human adoption of some of these different things and still wanting to do certain things. Like, I'm sure there'll be some founders who are like, we could solve this problem. And people were like, well, I actually like solving that problem myself. And so there's probably some stuff that AI is more than capable of solving that humanity will just push back. And then there's some stuff that will happily give up and say, yeah, go ahead, you take it. So I think that's, I'm glad you said part.
That too, because I was also going to add that there is like some sort of event horizon for each individual thing. It's not like, oh, now AGI is better than humans. It's like, well, it's better at humans than this job, but not that job. And the agents need to get better and the humans keep getting worse. And so like at some point that crosses where you're like, oh no, actually it's better now. And that could be in a wildly different decades apart for different roles and jobs and stuff, which is fascinating.
Real quick, I didn't answer your question of what the movie was. I think it's Her. Where Joaquin Phoenix is talking to his girlfriend, and the moment of, hey, am I just talking to you right now, or are you talking to others? And she's like, I'm talking to 29,714 other people right now. I think that's a more realistic future, and voice AI and stuff like that. So just to answer your question, close the loop, Her, I think, is the most realistic movie.
I think so too. It's a great choice. I mean, obviously I would end up in like Star Trek Next Generation seems to be the most optimistic view, but Her was not the most pessimistic. It seemed to be sort of realistic that there are humans still doing human things, but there are also super intelligent beings. And I like that they eventually just get bored and leave. Spoiler alert. Yeah, peace out. We don't need to do this anymore. So I wanted to ask you before we go, how can you help us? How can we help you?
Yeah, I think that anyone listening that's interested in getting featured in the media could go to featured.com and sign up, get your own personal PR agent, and start to see what kind of stuff comes back. That's one. If you want to connect with me, LinkedIn is probably the best method, and happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
There you go. Brett Farmiloe on LinkedIn or featured.com are the places to go there. And for Avenue 9, it's easy. It's avenue9.com. LinkedIn is also my preferred channel, but we're helping people figure out their story. What I do is context engineering for people. So if you wanted to get featured on a news report, let's talk about you first. I'll interview the founder, your top salesperson, your best clients, get the stories together and hone that into a coherent message that I call a scalable story. Then we can take AI and we can take featured and we can stretch that out to a lot of different places or find a lot of different use cases for it. But I found that marketing is something that's really hard to do for yourself. You can't read the label from inside the bottle. So you don't know what the interesting part of your story is, because for you, that was the boring part. you've never thought about it. So if you need help, go to avenue9.com or reach out to me. I'd love to help. Until next time, keep going. Have fun, everybody.